everybody. Zach Ditmars here. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of Live with Lenny. Bluefish have been marauding the mid-Atlantic and areas ranging from Eastern Bay all the way down to the CBBT. So we're going to dive into how to find them and how to catch them tonight. Then we'll be joined by reports editor Dylan Waters. We're going to take a look at what's hot and what's not on this week's fishing reports. And then we also have a double cameo appearance with two very special mystery guests. I'd like to start off this evening by thanking Suzuki Marine for sponsoring this episode. They'll be joining us here in the bottom right corner for the remainder of the evening. So thanks for sponsoring us, Suzuki Marine. If you are looking for a new repower, if you're looking for service, hop over to fishtalkmag.com/Suzuki. There you'll find a list of participating Chesapeake Bay and Mid-Atlantic Suzuki Marine outboard dealers. We have a huge list. If you can scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll find a map to find one close to your area. I'd also like to bring to your attention that today is the close of our September Fishing Kids cover contest. So you have until midnight tonight to submit a picture of your fishing kid. Just hop over here to fishtalkmag.com cover-contest. And there's all kinds of criteria on what makes a good cover. Leaving some room for the Fish Talk logo and cover lines is important. And it is for kids, but you must be 18 or older to participate. So upload pictures of your kids. All right. Now we can jump into the show, and I can bring on our angler-in-chief, Mr. Lenny Rudo.
Hey, what's happening, Zach?
What's happening? Sorry for the long-winded intro there.
No, that was great. And I want to thank you again for the intro video clips you put together. I love that.
Yeah, no problem. It's a lot of fun.
Odd how right at the end there is a Suzuki in the background, because I do have a Suzuki on my boat, and I do love it. I got to tell you,
you have Suzuki on your boats.
Oh, boats. That's correct. I have multiple Suzukis. Last night, we ran out and did the sunset bite at Thomas Point, and on the way home, I was cruising back. We were doing like 37, 38, and I just couldn't resist it. I had to push the throttle. I had to all the way down. And there's something about burning dinosaurs through a 300 horse outboard that is just exhilarating.
So you have a 26 Camus HB hybrid bay boat. You have a 300 horsepower 4-stroke Suzuki. What's your top speed on? What do you get?
The fastest I've ever seen is 52. That was a light boat, just me aboard, which I did on purpose, because actually when I first put the rig together, they said, this isn't a huge engine for a 26-footer. I don't think you're going to see 50. And I was like,
what kind of burn do you get on that?
Ooh, honestly, I haven't even looked at that. Maybe I'm just like,
Never mind.
Normally, I can tell you I'm getting around 3 miles to the gallon, which is pretty rocking cool. And I'm normally cruising in the mid to upper 30s. If I put the throttle down a little bit more, 40-mile-an-hour cruise is doable. It's perfectly okay. That's burning a little more fuel. But hey, it's fun.
Right on.
So we got an interesting night tonight. This is going to be a little different than usual, folks. We're going to jump right into the Bluefish thing, which is already changing. It's really interesting. I put together the slides for tonight's show on Monday. Today is Thursday, and the fishery's changed quite a bit in the last week in the bay. So if you're looking to get out right now and catch some fish, this tune in, especially when we bring in Dylan. He's going to have just the latest intel. And it's rapidly changing. It's really interesting. I got to mention one more thing before we get to the blues. We've had some crazy reports in the last week. I have heard about multiple black sea bass caught in the Patapsco. I've seen them as far north as the Bay Bridge, never farther up than that. So that is really interesting. And there are lots of little redfish swimming around the mid bay right now. Little guys, 7 to 12 inches, but it's really interesting, right?
Very cool. It's worrisome, but also kind of exciting,
Yeah, things are changing, but it is interesting. Should we dive in?
We should. I'm going to step away here and just thanks for everyone for tuning in out there on Facebook and YouTube. So just if you have any questions or comments, we'll put those up in real time. If we don't get to it right away, we'll find a time when it's a little more relevant to the conversation. So pop those up there, and we'll do our best to answer everybody. Thanks.
Absolutely. Let's get to slide 1. And thank you for filling that in, Zach, because I totally forgot to tell everybody, please put your questions in. That's why we do this, so we can answer them on the spot. And I'm betting you're going to have some questions for some of the folks who we're going to have on later. This should be really interesting. So slide number 1, pretty obvious. When you're looking for bluefish, this is, what you hope and pray for. You don't always see it. But when you see the birds, obviously that indicates where the bluefish are. Now, what I've been hearing lately is they're very up and down. One day you'll be in the mouth of the chop tank and you'll see this kind of action. The next day you won't. And then you see it in Eastern Bay. And then the next day you won't. So it is really very up and down, very sketchy. What I always tell folks is when the bird play starts happening, I find as many fish with my binoculars as I do with my fish finder. And I mean that. Now they're not normal binoculars. They're image stabilized. They give a magnification of 14. So they're potent and you just can't get that out of regular binocs. I strongly recommend them. They cost an arm and a leg, but it's money well spent. Considering how much we spend on our fish finders, I look at the gyro binocs and I say, man, you know what? That's a worthy investment. So hopefully you'll see this, but if not, or maybe if you do, Zach, go ahead and pop up the next slide, please. And hey, we recognize that character, right? That was on my old boat. I think that might have just been a year or two ago. But you can see that Zach is holding a metal spoon. And when bluefish are your quarry, metal spoons are a great way to go. Basically because they're toothproof, right? A bluefish can't bite through that. You can also use a toothproof plastic like a Z-Man's. They'll stand up to blues. Sometimes the fish will hit at the head and they might get bitten off a little more commonly, but not so much. But, when blues are the target and I know they're around and that's what I'm going for, I definitely reach for the spoons more than anything else, that hard metal that they just can't chew through. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. Matt's asking, do you use a wire leader for bluefish? I hate losing spoons to bluefish. With a spoon like that Zach is holding that's, 4 inches long or longer, I do not. I find it very rare that that's going to get snapped off. It does happen on occasion. But not often. And if you use, like, say, a 30-pound fluoro leader, that'll stand up to, like, one initial hit, likely, not always, but likely. Now, if you're tying light mono or a braid directly to that spoon, yeah, that'll get sliced off in no time. It's not going to hurt anything if you put, a 6-inch trace of wire in front of that spoon. That's certainly not a bad idea. All right, let's go to the next slide and take a look at another item that works really well on these blues. That's a popping cork with a toothproof plastic. It's rigged 3 feet underneath of it. You can't really see that because of the way Ryan's holding the lure there, but it's about 3 feet down. I started using the popping corks because of the mackerel, because they work really well on the Spanish mackerel. But what I found is the blues attack these things with abandon. Now, I haven't yet had one bite off my popping cork. I expect that to happen. Sooner or later, a bluefish is probably going to hit the cork instead of the lure and end up taking it away. But you do have a swivel on top of it, so you got a little bit of protection. Like I say, sooner or later it's bound to happen. But this is not a bad choice. If you're looking in the tackle box for what to grab and you don't have the spoon and you see a popping cork rig, as long as you've got the toothproof plastic, this is another good bet. I've yet to try a spoon under a popping cork, but that might work really well too. I might have to experiment with that. All right, Zach, take us to the next slide, please. We see here one of the big dangers of getting into a bird show with bluefish, or for that matter, with any fish, and that is catching a bird. We don't like to do this. Obviously, it takes away from the fishing time, kind of messes things up quite a bit. And I'm going to give you a tip right now on avoiding this that is critical. A lot of times what happens is you pull up to the bird show and everybody makes these hard, long, arcing casts that go way up into the sky and arc down before the lure hits the water. That's normally when you get your birds. It's not going to happen because the bird is chasing the lure. It happens because you make these big, long, arcing casts, and as your line is sort of ballooned out through the air there, the birds just fly into the line. They don't know what's going on. They cartwheel, and then the next thing you know, the line's all tangled up in their wings. So you can cut down on the number of birds you hook like 90% if, when you're in that bird show, instead of making that big, long, arcing overhand cast, you make a low to the water sidearm cast, right? You might not get quite as much distance, but you probably don't need it anyway since you're in the middle of a feeding frenzy. And that low sidearm cast, the moment that lure hits the water, that line sinks right down and is in the water too. And it's very rare when you do that for the bird to hit the line and get all spun up in it. It just doesn't happen much. So, and again, that's true for any bird show. It doesn't matter if they're over rock or blues or mackerel, whatever. Really, really good way to avoid boating the bird. All right, let's go on to the next slide, please, Zach. What about spot? Right? Everybody likes to live line the spot for the rockfish. Why not live line them for bluefish? Well, you can do that, and yes, you'll catch a few fish. But here's what I've found through time. If you put a hook through the nose of that spot and you throw it into the frenzy, you will likely reel back the head of a spot. The bluefish will just chop it off right at the gills. If you put the hook through the back of the spot and you fling it into the frenzy, you will likely reel in either the back half or the front half of the spot, or maybe neither, and just get a little piece of meat in the middle with your hook through it. Those fish have pretty darn good eyesight. They're pretty keyed in on the hooks, and a lot of times they will bite the spot off around the hook. And I'll bet you guys who've been live lining for years and have been in the mixed bluefish rockfish thing, you've seen this, right? You've reeled back a chunk of spot with the hook in it, and then you throw the chunk of spot back out and you think, well, bluefish has got to eat this, and then they don't eat it. They're, for whatever reason, they've gotten pretty darn good at spotting those hooks, and that's the likely result. That's likely what's going to happen if you pitch a spot out there. All right, Zach, go ahead and take us to the next page, please. Now, I want everyone to be aware that in the last couple of weeks, we've seen fish like this showing up. This is a recent picture. I think we may have had this in the reports last week from Mid-Bay. But this isn't the only one. These big chopper blues have been popping up here and there amongst the average, say, 20-inch fish. So be ready for this guy. Now, if you catch one of these, you know, it's perfectly legal to keep. It's perfectly fine to keep. I never want to tell anybody not to keep a fish that's legal for them to keep. But I'm going to tell you right now, they are not good eating. All right. It's like keeping a 60-pound black drum. It's just you're going to be bummed after the fact that you kept that fish. The meat on these big old blues, it just kind of comes apart and it's mushy and it doesn't taste great. And, you know, again, everybody can do whatever they want to do, and I'm not going to knock them for it. But my suggestion would be if you catch a blue that's over like 3-4 pounds, you just let it go, because they, honest to God, they just aren't that good to eat. And I'm betting there will be someone out there who will hear me say that and then catch one and then say, oh man, I'm going to try it anyway. And then afterwards, you're going to be like, well, that wasn't very good. It's just a reality. Sometimes those big old fish just aren't great to eat. And it's as true with bluefish as it is with any fish. All right, Zach, why don't you pop up that next? Oh, wait a minute. We got a question from Tommy coming in. Chopper has been a long time. Yes, Tommy, they used to be all over the bay. When I was young, I mean, when I was in like my teens and my early 20s, they ruled the bay. We didn't have any rockfish, but the big bluefish ruled the bay. And like a 4 or 5 pounder was not at all uncommon. I would say it was kind of average. A 10 pounder was not average, but, you know, a good fish you might catch. So maybe some of them are coming back in the bay. I don't know, but we've seen a lot this week. Patrick says, my smoker says otherwise. Patrick, I challenge you to smoke a 3-pound blue next to a 10-pound blue, and you tell me what the results are like. Smoking is the best way to handle the big ones. I will go along with that. But I challenge you, try it out, and then get back to me, okay? Shoot me an email, let me know, and we'll talk about it. Because, well, we got another from Gary. Between 1988 and 90, I used wireline on my Pen 300s for fishing blues in the Bluefish tournament. They're still in excellent shape since they've been in stores since 1990. Should I strip all the wire off and use mono or braid? These are my trolling reels. Well, Gary, that's an interesting question. It's your call. I would say that I had several reels that still had wire line a few years ago. I did strip them and use them for other stuff because the braid kind of works as well at getting deep as the wire, which is, what we were all after with wire line. Now, that said, I'm not aware of anybody fishing with the traditional methods for these fish. These are being caught by guys who are slinging jigs or throwing spoons or chasing the breaking blues. So the wireline trolling thing, I don't know. Maybe it'll work great. I can't make a call on that. But like I say, I did undo mine years ago. I took the wire off and I use them for other stuff now. Of course, the wire line, that used to be the thing. But we used to use them for rockfish too, right? We bottom bounce for rockfish with it. And that's just kind of not how things are done these days, which is a really interesting dovetail into our next conversation. Everybody remember that, all right? We used to do it very differently. Some of the old school methods still work, right? But there's new stuff. And sometimes the new stuff works better. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. Zach, we got any more questions in the queue?
Just a few comments. Tommy said he caught them back in the 80s up the Patapsco as far as the Hanover Street Bridge. He also agreed that the smoked bluefish is delicious. And Patrick accepts your challenge, but would love to do so on your boat, I think he suggested.
Oh, I'm in, Patrick. I'm in.
It's been a while.
We'll hook up my email afterwards. We'll do it.
It's been a while since we all fished together.
It has been a while. And I'm in. I love it.
All right. So I think we're all caught up.
So we're about to bring in Dylan Wooders. Let's throw up the picture here. So everybody probably knows Dylan's name at this point for sure, because he's been editing the reports for over a year now. And I'm going to call, especially with this picture, I'm going to call Dylan our latest Fish Talk rock star. He's been doing an absolutely phenomenal job. The reports have never looked better. They've never had more info, never had more detail. But as I was talking with Dylan back and forth, I came to a realization. Well, first, let's look at who Dylan is. Dylan is 25 years old. He recently graduated from St. Mary's College with a double major in biology and environmental studies. He works for the DNR. He's a resources technician too, which means like if the deer gets loose in your living room, who do you call? You call Dylan. He comes and gets that deer. He's based in the Middle Bay zone. He specializes in stripers and perch, but he regularly does travel far afield to go after, just about anything. And he has a really strong presence on YouTube. His channel is The Wooders Edge. Give it the little @Wooders Edge TV. And, as I was talking to Dylan and fishing with him, I came to some realizations. And the first time this sort of hit me, we were in the Fish for a Cure tournament. Zach, you'll remember this. You were in it too. And Dylan was fishing with us. And he was throwing something that I wouldn't have thrown. And he was throwing it on a rod and reel that I wouldn't have thrown, on a line that I wouldn't have thrown. And he caught the biggest fish that we caught that day. He caught our number one fish. I think it was 27.5, if I remember right. And it made me realize that, at Fish Talk, we've got the sort of old school knowledge, we've got the experience. Everybody knows me. I've got a pretty good grip on historically fishing in the Bay. We got Zach. Zach is a solid angler, but no offense, Zach, he's no spring chicken. We've got Eric Packard on Team Fish Talk. He is a great resource, tremendous wealth of fishing knowledge. But he's even older than I am. And I often tell people, I remember when I was in my 20s and I would go do crazy stuff and I would do nutty things, but they were also very innovative things. And there's a certain enthusiasm and energy that comes with youth that 20-somethings have that us old guys just don't have. And I thought, if there's anything Fish Talk is lacking, it's that youth, it's that enthusiasm, it's that innovation. So we decided to put together a Team Fish Talk 2 a new Team Fish Talk that we would sponsor with youthful anglers who had a different outlook. And they also have a much better grip on the whole social media thing, the whole YouTube thing. They make cool content that is stuff that, I think the content we already make is cool, but it's different. It has a youthful eye to it. So we decided that, number one on the team, obviously, was going to be Dylan, because he is exactly what we're looking for. So everybody, let's welcome Dylan Wooders. Let's bring him on.
How's it going, Lenny? Thanks for having me on.
Dylan, what's happening? Zach, come on, man. Let's welcome Dylan.
Welcome, Dylan.
Where's the big round of
What's going on, Zach?
applause?
I don't know.
Come on.
That'll suffice.
Man, Dylan, I'm sorry you didn't get the big round of applause.
It's all right. It's okay.
So, Dylan, I already introduced you, so folks know who you are. But why don't you tell us a little more? Do you like fishing?
Love fishing. Yeah, I mean, any free time I have, I'm spending it on the water. In the wintertime, I'll navigate to hunting a little bit, but I'm fishing 12 months out of the year if I get the chance. So yeah, I'm all about it.
Nice. I love it. I know you're going to rock it as part of Team Fish Talk. Honestly, you already have. I mean, really.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you've been the reports editor for a while now, and you have been doing it. Speaking of which, I mentioned earlier, the fishing has been changing just over this past week. Can you give everyone a sneak preview on what's been going on?
Yeah, so I've been working on the report, and you're exactly right. The fisheries changed a little bit this week. Up until the beginning of the week, especially in the mid-bay, we've been lacking on the mackerel front. They've just been late to show up this year. But as of just a couple of days ago, they've shown up right on time. So, they're showing up as far north as the south side of Poplar. Actually had my dad and brother. I was not able to get out with them, but they were out earlier in the week and caught 8 in between the Sharps Island Light and south side of Poplar, along with some bluefish. They said the bird action was up and down, like you mentioned earlier, wasn't really staying up. There was a lot of boats in the area. They found that they caught more of their mackerel staying away from the fleet. So sometimes if you can get away from them, you might find a little pocket of fish. And their mackerel were nice sized fish, anywhere from 17 to 20 inches. So definitely fun to catch.
Awesome. But, any other crazy catches going on you've heard about?
Yeah. So I mean, out on the coast, the tuna bite's been hit or miss. I'm sure you're aware of that. And we've seen, from what I've heard this week, the sharks have kind of moved in and even if you hook up, it's hard to get them to the boat without chunks of them missing. But there's been a good influx of peanut mahi this week. Boats are having a lot of success with that. So that's good to hear. And, the flounder bite's great. And at the inshore wrecks and reefs, guys are doing a really good job with them, along with the sea bass. But I got a call from my friend Micah yesterday, and he was down targeting bull reds at the Bay Bridge Tunnel, in between the tunnel and Kiptopeke, over the last weekend. And he went out with a good friend at night. And he said they got on the water around 11, and the bite was really slow. They weren't catching any fish. But around midnight, he said it was cloudy. The sky cleared, and, we had the full moon this week. So he said it was almost like it was daylight out. And he said the fishing just turned on. They were jigging for them and they caught a bunch of bull reds in the mid 40s up to 50 inches. But the cool thing he mentioned was that when the moon came out, there were crabs swimming on top of the water, and the reds were coming up and blowing up on the crabs. So they were able to cast on them, which was pretty cool. So they had a good trip. But yeah, I mean, fishing is pretty good all over the bay right now. Of course, you have the midsummer, late summer really slow down of water temperatures get hot. Those bite windows can be condensed. So you want to really focus in on the low light hours are a good time to be out on the water right now. If you're going to be searching for rockfish, which of course opened up back this week. And it seems like the hot spot for that is still the Patapsco in the upper bay. That's where the highest concentration of fish is. But really anywhere throughout the bay, in the shallows, you have a good chance at finding these fish. So you're going to want to look for shallow water structure, submerged rocks. Docks have been good, especially in the mid-bay rivers throughout the summer. That bite seems to be, still taking place. The fish haven't switched to that fall pattern where they're schooling up, getting out in a little bit deeper water.
You and I haven't even had a chance to talk about this yet, but last night we actually ran out to Thomas Point. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is we fished, I don't know, maybe we fished there 45 minutes and we really didn't catch much. We got a couple dinks, one 19-incher. but it wasn't, it was insufficient catching for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't happy with it. And so we ran back in the river and fished for about an hour and didn't do much. And I was like, dang, maybe we should run back out to Thomas. So we ran back out there, and we got out there like a half an hour before the sun hit the horizon, and it was the magic time.
Yep.
And it was a whole different ball game. All of a sudden, the fish were hitting, and we bagged on them pretty good. No real big fish, but up to 22 inches.
Yeah.
But the different, like you mentioned earlier, that condensed window of opportunity. For an hour, there just wasn't much going on, and then an hour later, it started to happen.
Yep. Yeah, and that's consistent with a lot of the reports I've been seeing this week. The few guys that I've talked to, when they're going out in the mornings, they're saying they're finding a great shallow water, topwater bite, but by 7 a.m. that bite is shut down. So you really got to focus in on those, low light hours, get out early, or focus in late. But I mean, it's well worth it if you can get in on that action.
Interesting. That is interesting. All right. Well, Dylan, should we bring on teammate number 2?
Let's do it.
All right. So we are now going to bring in Mark Nicholas, known as Cha-Cha in the fishing and social media world. There he is with a pretty little fish. Oh my goodness. That thing is, man, I wish I caught that. That is a beautiful red. You can find Mark on Instagram at Cha-Cha Fishing at Cha-Cha _fishing. Formerly that was China Marcus Fishing. He also has quite a TikTok following, which, honest to God, I just don't understand TikTok at all, not even a little bit. But be that as it may, Mark is 25. He is a hardcore kayak guy with a serious passion for chasing snakeheads, along with other species, but the snakeheads are his main gig. He's also sponsored by High Octane Custom Baits and OC Kayak, and he works as a social media manager. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. What's up, guys?
Oh, there's So, Mark, man, I understand congratulations are in order on the snakehead front.
Thank you.
Tell us what just happened.
So this past weekend was the High Octane Custom Baits round 1 of the East versus West tournament. So we're putting on this tournament this is our second year for it, but essentially the east side of the bay and the west side of the bay each has plenty of snakeheads, and there's always like a great debate on what side has bigger fish and whatnot. So we have round 1 where you choose a side you're fishing. It has to be tidal, connected to the bay in some way, and you're fishing on the east side or the west side, and there's those 2 divisions, and then top 5 from each side moves on to the side that had the largest fish from the total stringer from top 5. So I got first on east side, but west side won. So now we're all going to the west side somewhere.
So how big was first east side? How big was your fish?
They all range between 28 and just under 30 inches, with 141.5 of the top 5 fish. And I was out fishing with Eddie Weber, and he got second, and we were just focusing on fry balls, just finding those baby snakeheads. They'll be bubbling on the surface of the water, all tight together in a pod. And usually if they haven't been touched or a bird or something hasn't messed with them, then there will be parents under them, and the parents will go nuts to protect their babies and attack your frog or fluke or whatever you're throwing in there.
So what were you throwing?
All frog that day.
All frogs.
All topwater frog.
I keep hearing frogs, but I got to tell you, personally, I like the fluke because whenever I throw the frog, I can't pause. I can't do the pause, because you're supposed to pause, right? Pause, then set the hook. The moment the water erupts, I send that frog flying through the air every time.
Yeah.
And finally, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to throw the fluke because I'm blowing it every time.
It's
How do you resist?
exciting.
How long do you wait before you set the hook?
I try to count to at least 2, maybe 3 if I'm patient enough, but usually 2.
So like 1, 2.
I'll be like 1, 2, and then wham.
I don't think I can do that. Just don't think I can do that. So Mark, I was saying before, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. By the way, we're putting Mark on the spot. I was saying before how what I realize, I don't have anymore is that kind of innovative spirit, right? That spirit of adventure, do something new, try something different. That comes with youth. So I want you to think and tell us what innovative thing, tactic, technique, place. What innovative thing have you done lately that like stands out as like a wow, you know what? That was pretty dang cool and I caught fish. Can you think of anything?
I guess this applies to innovation, but recently I've just been exploring a lot. I've been driving super far, just trying new spots, especially with Snakehead, because now they're in basically every tributary of the bay, and it's just a matter of finding which trib is going to be productive and have, a lot of fish,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of trying to bounce around. And speaking of frogging, another kind of thing that I've been trying is with a frog. A lot of people think with Snakehead that you have to work it really slow, and with Snakehead, they're so unpredictable. Their patterns change day to day. I've actually been power frogging, quote unquote, where you're just covering water with a frog and then just up, twitching it all the way back, waiting for something to move, even if it doesn't get popped. Kind of using a frog as a search bait when, in my eyes, I used it as more finesse, I guess, in the past.
Power frogging.
I like that.
I like that too. Yeah, power frogging. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you something funny, Mark. When I was your age, we used to take ADC map books. Have you ever seen an ADC map book?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Dylan, you ever seen an ADC map? Of course
Nope.
not. They probably don't make them anymore. There were these big map books. You would fold them out and look at the maps on paper. We used to sit there and stare at them and go, there's a big blue dot right there. That's got to be water. Where can we park near there? And we would just go out blind and like look. That's how we found new spots. So you got a leg up on me on that, man. That is definitely nice. All right, now, folks, if you got any rockfish questions, pitch them to Dylan. If you got any snakehead questions, pitch them to Mark. But in the meanwhile, we are going to bring in team member number 3. Whoop! Wait a minute. Oh, we got one. We got one already though. Chatterbaits for snakes. What do you say?
Chatterbaits are killer for snakehead, especially during the summertime. Springtime, they may not love that vibration. They're a little spooky and a little crazy sometimes, but summertime, if you can find areas that have snakehead that don't have super thick grass, or you have on a high tide, you have, say, a foot of water over top of that grass, chatterbaits can definitely be killer for reaction strikes.
Cool. All right. Oh. Hey, very nice, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Excellent. We got a lot of welcomes. Very good. All right, let's bring in angler number 3. There's a special relationship here, people, and he does hold a special place in my heart. David Rudo. David is my son. He is a 23-year-old diehard kayak angler, recently returned to Chesapeake Country after living in Louisiana and attending the University of New Orleans, where he majored in bull redfish and minored in sheep's head and specks. Judging by what I saw on social media while he was in school down there, I would say that's pretty accurate. Currently, David studies in between casts at Salisbury State. He's on Instagram at Reelin' with Rudo. David, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah.
Very cool. So now, David, you are currently.
There we go.
Applause.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Zach.
Now, David, just this afternoon, you were doing something interesting. That's why you're not back at home yet. I know you had planned on being in front of the computer, but traffic at the Bay Bridge got you. Why don't you tell us what were you doing and why?
Sure. So what I was doing was taking a group of new anglers that I, kind of got started out on a kayaking trip and basically teaching them to kayak so that in the next few weeks they can have their kayak skills, up to par and be safe. And we're going to go teach them how to kayak fish. It's going to be a great time. Going to end with a little private tournament between them all, do some prizes. And that's actually through the DNR. I'm an intern with them this summer. It's been a ton of fun. And my whole goal is to just get new anglers into the sport. So it's been great so far.
And that's super awesome. That's like you've been spending all your time taking new people fishing. I love it.
Yeah, it's been great. Nothing I'd rather do.
I'm saying chip off the old block. Okay, I'm sorry, but I gotta say it.
I'm here for it. I'm happy.
All right, so you did do a lot of hyper-focused fishing for the Bull Reds while you were in Louisiana, right? And
A bit for the bulls, yeah. I definitely focus more on over slot fish. Something you got to remember with Louisiana is that there's a lot less bull redfish than there are here. But targeting the over slot fish and the true bulls is the same. That being said, in Louisiana, they consider anything over slot a bull for a lot of people. So by those standards, I caught a lot of bulls. But yeah, I spent a lot of time targeting the bigger redfish and just redfish in general. I love reds. They're like my favorite species out there to target.
And you did something this year that I've never done. Again, this goes to youth, innovation, and also, honestly, time flexibility. You caught bull reds from a kayak in the Chesapeake Bay in, was it March or April? April. Okay, so let's think about that for a minute, people. Bull redfish, Chesapeake Bay, April. It was Virginia waters, but you were still on the bay, right?
Yeah, I was on the bay.
And that, I mean, honestly, that is a pretty major accomplishment. That's not easy to do. How big were those fish?
We had one fish under 40 inches out of like 60 fish, and the largest one was probably 52 or 53. Mark was there. He had a great time too. I think every single one of us got 2 fish off the kayak over 50 inches. It was like one of the best days of my life, frankly.
That's pretty intense stuff, and that is not easy to accomplish in Chesapeake country. I mean, or anywhere, actually. It's not easy to accomplish anywhere. Why don't you give us some insight into, say, how you found those fish? Because that's like the biggest thing in my head is, how in the world do you locate these fish?
Just bull reds in general? We're talking a time of year? I mean, that's a broad question.
On a kayak.
On a kayak, okay.
You're on a kayak.
Cool. So off the kayak, my biggest thing is you want to be somewhere where you're going to have numbers of redfish. And so my farthest north point for me personally when I do that is Point Lookout. I've had some great days out of Point Lookout. There's some great slot fishing right inside there within range on a kayak. But the 2 things that I'm really looking for when I'm going to look for redfish is some deeper water structure, and I'm saying deeper as relative to redfish, so 5 to 10 feet. And then I'm also looking for some salt marsh that I can get up to and go and sight fish during a high tide.
So you're sight fishing on the high tide. That's interesting. And we should point out to folks, this is a completely separate tactic and a completely separate fishery than the Middle Bay Bull Red open water fishery, right? That's a whole different ball game. That's a late summer, early fall thing. And this is spring, right?
Yep, spring.
What about fall?
Fall? So I haven't been back in Maryland enough to give you a solid answer for the fall fish here. But from what I've seen, it's just not too dissimilar for the summer. We have lots of open water fish chasing bait. And personally in fall, I actually really love chasing slot redfish too, because it's a great time of year to go sight fish. You generally have a lot of clean water. And a really like a good tip I have for that, actually, I had to bring up tonight, something I found out in Louisiana and then had Mark test for me in Maryland before I came back, and he had some good success with it. And that is when you're finding redfish that are really keyed in on crabs, sometimes they won't hit. A paddle tail, a straight tail. Even if you're using gulp or something, they want something that looks like a crab, smells like a crab. And you can still get away with using artificials in this scenario if you use a weedless EWG weighted hook, very lightly weighted, with a crawfish that's white with some little orange tips. And you need the ones that are curled in. They flutter when you use them. It's clear as day. These are the crawfish you want. And it actually, at least what I think, is it's imitating a crab fluttering through the water. If you work that real slow along the bottom, stop it for a second, they'll come up and just inhale it. I've caught a lot of fish doing that. Adding some crab procure to that is key.
Now, when you say crawfish, you're talking about a plastic, right?
Yes. Yep. Plastic crawfish lure. But they have to be the ones with the curled ends that wobble. It looks like a crab fluttering through the water, and the reds love it. It's great.
So that's really a bass lure.
Yeah, that's a bass lure. I've caught a lot of reds on like little bass lures. I usually am pitching stuff between 3 and 4 inches.
People, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's innovation. It's looking at things differently with a new set of eyes. Because you know what I've never done? I've never thrown a plastic crawfish bass lure at a redfish. That hasn't happened. So Gary's asking, how far up the bay do the reds run? Now we should differentiate here again, because you got a couple different things going on. You've got the open water bite versus the shallows, and then you've got the bulls versus the slots, which we're almost talking about 4 completely different fisheries, right? Dylan, we've been hearing about reds pretty far up though, right, this year?
Yeah, we've seen small reds, in that 12-inch range all the way up into the South River. As we move later into the summer, those fish might even make it up to the Bay Bridge or even to some of the upper Bay rivers. But the white perch anglers are finding a lot of them in the shallow, or not a lot of them. They're finding some of them in the shallows. I've been out on a few trips recently where, we're catching over 2 hours. We might catch like 2 or 3 reds, which is always a really cool catch to catch those in the mid-bay area. But, those are small 12 to 14-inch fish. You're going to have to go further south if you want to get into slot or bull red territory.
Now, what's the farthest north so far this year that you've heard of slots being caught?
Farthest north that I have heard is in between the Chop Tank and Little Chop Tank. But, common grounds for them to move up, at least on the western side, is Calvert Cliffs. I haven't gotten a lot of solid reports out of that area yet. But, guys that are running out of Solomons are finding them sporadically. Of course, it seems like these fish are all over the place and nowhere all at the same time. It's very hard to locate them. A lot of guys are running over 100 miles a day just to try and find one school. But when you do find them, it makes it worth it. And one of the things you can do, especially since you were talking about bluefish earlier, is if you find a school of bluefish, keep a close eye on your meter, because if you see some big marks on the bottom, it might indicate some bull reds feeding on the scraps that are falling down to the bottom. So I do know a few of the light tackle guides have found them that way this year. They'll find the school of bluefish, and then the reds will move in underneath of them.
And we should mention, you want to go to something heavy?
Yes, yeah, you're going to want to go. Yep.
Yeah, get down deep.
Very heavy, large soft plastics, 7 to 8, 9, 10-inch baits. That's going to get down below the school of blues, and you'll be able to jig those fish. That's what a lot of guys are doing.
Right. And Gary, just for the record, I've seen slots as far up as the south, Thomas Point, although that was years ago. So, like Dylan said, they hopefully they'll keep moving up. They'll keep moving around. We'll see where they go. And as far as the bulls go, generally speaking, the Chop Tank is sort of the northernmost part of their common range throughout the summer, but they've showed up as far as Eastern Bay. And last year, there was was it like a 10-day period when we got multiple reports from Eastern Bay of bulls under breaking fish? It was like 10 days, right? Maybe a week.
Yeah, around that. And Lenny, was I out with you? And did we hear of a report of some guys catching them trolling for mackerel and blues around the Sharps Island area, or was that cobia? I can't remember.
Both at different times.
Okay.
Yeah. That it absolutely happens. That
Mhm.
absolutely happens. So, Mark, we showed a picture of a red with you, but of course you're a snake guy. Oh, and Eric's chiming in. He's seeing slots just north of the Potomac and near St. Jerome's Creek. Cool. So how often do you target reds versus snakes, and what a different kind of fit? How do you decide what to do?
Well, recently, honestly, since almost last year to the date, for whatever reason, redfish just popped up. And I'm like, I either saw one caught around, in the bay, or I don't really know, but I was like, I didn't realize we could target these in the bay, but I really want to. And I didn't know that we had an established population, but then I went down there and I saw it and I was like, whoa, there's like a lot of fish moving around here in like the Virginia waters. And that's when I called Dave because I was out on the water. I'm like, hey, I'm seeing tailing reds out here, but I can't get them to bite. What do you throw at these dang things? He's like, throw something that imitates a crab. And yeah, but I mean, honestly, there are two reds versus snakes are very different, but I think I like both of them a lot because especially hunting for reds in the shallows, you're like stalking them. You're standing up on your kayak, you're push pulling with your paddle, and then you're just watching, looking for a little wake or a little ripple. And it's very similar with snakehead. It's more of a hunt and kind of like using your eyes and other senses. And I think that's why I've been attracted to reds a lot recently.
Interesting. Now let's we had Jay chimed in with a question, but let's address Paul's real quick since that's to you. How fast on the chatterbait?
Power through or slow creep. I would say it doesn't hurt to try both. When I throw a chatterbait, I tend to go a little bit more on the creep side where I'm just kind of snakehead. They're pretty lazy, it seems. So not burning it, but I mean, switch it up. But I've had more success slow rolling it.
Okay. Now, Zach, can we get back to I think it was Jay had a question in there for Dylan. There it is. What was Dylan using that was so different from what you and everyone else was using? Oh, shucks. Oh, Dylan, I think you're muted. We lost Dylan.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. I'm going to have to jog my memory on this, but I know I was using like a 7-foot medium rod. It was like a Johnny Morris with like 12-pound mono. And everybody thought that I was using way too light gear, especially, it was October. I think we were fishing. You're starting to get
November.
a better class of fish. November, that's what it was.
Yes.
You start to see a better class of fish. I tend to like to go a little lighter. David gets mad at me all the time for using mono over braid. But it worked that day. And I think if I remember correctly, I was throwing a white fluke tail, straight tail, or paddle tail, something. I don't remember exactly what I was using, but it was a lighter presentation than what a lot of other people were throwing.
I looked at it and I don't remember exactly what the lure was either, but what I recall is thinking, crap, if he gets bit, we'll never get it to the boat. Like by a big fish, the 30-inch plus fish. And you reminded me that you can catch an elephant using a peanut if you do it right.
Yep. Yeah. It's all about, learning how to, finesse the fish, having your drag set, knowing your gear plays a big role in being able to land, larger fish on lighter tackle.
Totally. And I knew that, but for some reason I forgot that, And It's funny, last week we were out on my boat at the Poor Man's, and the tuna would not bite a trolled lure, but they would hit topwater. And the only topwater I had on the boat was tiny little stuff. And we took a mahi rod and tied a mirror lure on it, and a 50-pound tuna blew up on it. And it was exactly the same thing. It was like, all right, we've got a spinning rod with 30-pound braid, 20-pound fluoro, and a plug that's made for rockfish, and now we're hooked up to this 50-pound tuna fish, it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I only lasted 20 minutes. I handed the rod off to David's brother, Max, and I said, you do it. But he fought that fish for another 45 minutes, and eventually we got it to the gale. And it's just prime example of if you do it right, you can really catch a big fish on super light gear. And sometimes you can't get that fish to bite on what you want to use on that heavy stuff. You gotta go light. And man, you proved it that day. I gotta grab this. Okay, hold on a minute. Don't go anywhere. I saved the lure. This is the mirror lure. This is one hook. This is what came back from that tuna. That's one hook. Here's the other hook. Look at that. That fish broke one and bent the other. And that was after what got demolished? A spook got utterly obliterated. Like we reeled back the eye. That was all that was left.
I've never been more upset over missing a fishing trip.
Sorry, Dave. I'm sure you were not happy to miss that one. It was the first time I've ever hooked a tuna on topwater. I've just never seen it happen. But as you know, because you saw on the boat yesterday, what did I do?
Went out and bought a bunch of big old poppers and heavy duty topwater.
I got a bunch of heavy duty topwater. That's right. Because they would not touch anything else. They would not. And like Dylan was saying earlier, the tuna bite's been tough this year. When you hook them, often a shark eats them. And that's been very problematic. So it was the only tuna fish we went home with, but I was very happy that we got them in the boat. Static. All right, Zach, we got any more questions queued up? What do we got sitting back there?
I feel like a reel would have been better.
I'm hearing all kinds of weird noise too. I don't know where that's coming from.
Dylan's having a party.
Who's having a party?
Dylan's having a party.
Who?
I got some
Yep.
roommates. It's all right.
Shucks, I thought you were at the office.
Nope, just at the at-home office.
Oh, yeah, actually, nope. I flagged a question from earlier. This is from Condre. Anyone want to tackle this one for Rock? When you say structure in the shallows, how shallow are you talking up against the shore? 15 feet or less, coming out of the bodkin up in Pasadena, Magazine.
Dylan, that sounds like it's your speed, man.
Yeah. Me and Dave go out a lot, but when I'm talking the shallows, I'm usually talking like 5 to 7 foot of water. I catch fish in shallow as 3, sometimes out in 10 foot of water. Generally, I'm looking, that 4 to 6 foot range is where I catch a lot of my shallow water fish per se. And the areas that I'm looking for are, docks that are coming off of points that you have a good current ripping around. Current is always, seems to trigger a bite. This time of year, I've mentioned earlier, the low light hours are good. So early mornings, late evenings. But the shallow water structure that I'm looking for are docks. If you know where any underwater rock piles are, those rockfish love to get on them. Usually that structure is, it is up against the shore. You do have some areas that you can find, submerged rocks, maybe a stump field that's out in, away from the shore. But a lot of the shallow water structure I'm targeting is up against the shoreline. So you'll be casting up to that. But Dave and I have been doing really good on docks in the mid-bay rivers this year. It seems like that bite is still good. So that's where we found a lot of our success.
So I just want to mention, Condre, if you're coming out of the bodkin, you've got prime shallow water structure. Right around the corner, there's the old bodkin lighthouse, which is now laying in 2 to 5 feet of water on the bottom. It's rubble. It's on the south side of the creek as you come out. And we have an article on Fish Talk, I believe that Wayne Young did, which talks about it. I don't know. I'm not going to be fast enough to find it. Maybe Zach can find the link and pop it up there at some point. But that is a really good shallow water spot. Personally, I call anything under 10 foot, I call shallow. So we're, talking about the same kind of thing. But those rocks off of Bodkin are a really good bet for you. If you don't know where those are, find that out. If you go to fishtalkmag.com and just plug in Bodkin, you'll in the search box. It's in the upper right-hand corner of the website. You will come across that article. And another one, of course, where you are is 7 Foot Knoll. Oh, there it is. There we go. Bodkin Point to Belvedere Shoals. So look for that article. That talks about it. The little star there in the center, or I guess that's the upper left at number 1. That's the spot we're talking about. And there's a bunch of rocks there. I should mention, don't go in there on a low tide until you learn that area. And God forbid, don't go in there with an inboard because you'll end up with a bent prop. that water gets very, very shallow right there. But that's a great spot. That tends to hold a lot of rockfish. And then also, of course, 7 Foot Knoll. On the east side, the rocks go out and around the pole itself. And there's deeper water off of them, but you can cast up to them there and get shallow. When fish are in the shallows, that's going to be a good zone. That should be a really good spot for you. So Tommy's chiming up here saying, Amped Up Anglers 3rd annual Perchapalooza is next Saturday right here in Pasadena. Appreciate you guys plugging our events in your magazine. Yeah, man. Perchapalooza next Saturday, Pasadena. Tommy, someone chime in, give us a little bit on where somebody should go to look for information if they're interested in joining in the Perchapalooza. I'm guessing Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook's the place to go. Yeah, Facebook's got all the info.
Okay, very good. Very good. So check that out on Facebook. And I got to say, I have not had the best perch fishing lately. Dang darn it. So we got a question from Paul here for Cha-Cha. What hours have been working for you on the snakes? Changing up locations depending on hour of the day. Mark, take it away.
Now that we're in the heat of the summer, definitely early mornings, first 2-3 hours of the morning, last 2-3 hours of the day. But something that's also really cool about the summertime is if you're not finding feeding fish and there are snakes that have fry balls in the area, it doesn't matter what time of the day it is. If you find fry balls and there's parents on them, they will feed to protect their young because they're not, they're not hungry. They're just simply protecting their young. So that you can find any time of the day, but definitely the first 2-3 hours of light, last 2-3 hours of the light. But I mean, sometimes in the summertime, I've run into days where even it's blazing 90 degrees out and fish are still biting at noon. But on average, definitely early mornings, late evenings.
And Fred's got a question for you on fishing way north. And if so, which river do you think is a better fisher for a beginner to try and catch one?
Way north, I'm guessing like Upper Bay area.
Yeah, so we delineate way north and Upper Bay, somewhere around the Gunpowder. Like the Gunpowder could fall into either. And then once you get north of there, you're kind of into the way north zone, northernmost parts of the bay.
Okay. Yeah, well, honestly, the Gunpowder around Mariner Point Park, that's a great area to look. Anywhere you can find grass and 3 feet of water or less will hold snakes around or in Gunpowder River. North of that, the Susquehanna Flats holds fish, and same thing, finding grass. The Susquehanna Flats are huge, so I would definitely recommend starting with the smaller creeks where you can just work a creek back and be able to see what's going on your left and right. But definitely the Gunpowder is a great place to start.
And here's Eric asking if you carry at least one 3000 series just in case you run up on the Bull Reds. And he's mentioning he's had some big losses due to undersized gear. Any advice?
I don't leave the dock without my 5000 Vanford with me. I always have that on, and I always have my, depending on how deep I'm fishing, like a heavy jig 1 to 2 ounces with a, usually 7-inch paddle tail on it. But I always have that ready to cast because you'll find them, and you have like sometimes you'll have 10 seconds to cast and then they're gone. It's very quick sometimes, especially if you're just running into a pair or a single fish. If you run into a giant school of reds that's actively feeding, they generally stay in the same area as long as the bait doesn't move for some reason. But yeah, I always have that rod rigged up. Like
now, Dave, can you also let us know line size, leader size?
Yes, so I'm running 50-pound braid, usually straight to a 50-pound leader. I might run 60. If I think there could be cobia in the area too, then I'm definitely going to run 60 on it. Because if you're in the lower bay and you're in open water where you're catching redfish, you always have a chance of running into a cobia or some other big cool species. So I usually run 50 or 60 for my main line on my leader.
And I want to mention something else that I don't worry about too much because I tend to use lighter stuff. But you've had hook issues too, because when you're pulling that much heat, you're gonna bend some hooks.
Yeah, you need really, really beefy stuff. The high octane stuff, I love their jig heads. GI jigs are good. The BKD jig heads are great. They're strong enough. But I would recommend, like, what I usually do is if I'm going to go fishing is I'll take the hook and I'll tie it on and I'll beef up my drag and I'll sink it into something and see if my drag pulls, if I'm going to bend out the hook, like, I'll test it before I go fishing a lot of times, especially if I'm using a new kind of jig head. Because there's nothing worse than having a nice fish buttoned up, and then all of a sudden you get that pop, and you're like, what the heck happened? You pulled up and your hook's half straight. Like, that's just awful.
Yeah, bent hooks are not awesome.
No.
Oh, we got another snake question. As far as snakes goes, Southern Maryland, other than the Potomac, Western Charles, any reports of them being caught in Calvert or St. Mary's? So, Dylan, Mark, either of you guys, you both might have insight into that. Calvert or St. Mary's?
Yeah, as far as Calvert goes, I mean they're in the Patuxent. Basically, all of the Patuxent tributaries. Jug Bay is a hot spot for them. The western branch of the Patuxent, which runs towards the Prince George's County side, is a great spot to look for them. You'll find some bass in there too. Down in St. Mary's, not super familiar with a lot of areas down there. I do know that some have been caught in basically all of the tidal tributaries down there, but that's with a lot of infrequencies. It seems like they pop up here and there. But yeah, the Patuxent in Calvert County is a good area to look. Any of those tidal creeks are going to have snakeheads for sure.
So Calvert, I'm going to mention one that makes me angry. All right, this makes me angry. Calvert Cliffs.
Yes, I've actually caught a snakehead in Calvert Cliffs.
That pond is riddled with them, and we can't go fishing there because there were complaints from bikers, joggers, walkers that these fishermen were, I don't know, in their way or whatever.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous claim, but yeah, that place is loaded with them.
Yeah. The ponds
it's a walk to get back to them, but it's about a mile walk to get back there. But it's worth it. There's snakes back there, but like you said, can't fish for them anymore. At least that's what the signs say.
Well, we got to pay attention to the signs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a shame. Hopefully at some point somebody will reassess that situation. And in all fairness, there was a problem where there was a walkway there, a boardwalk. And people were, jog and ride bikes back and forth. And some anglers who probably weren't making the best decision in the world decided to stand there and cast. And people, did not like having the lures flying around while they were biking and walking down the boardwalk. Now, in my mind, it would have made a whole lot more sense to put up a sign that said, no fishing from the boardwalk, right? They could have easily done that and ended the issue, but, it is what it is. And we've got Eric coming in and saying the upper St. Mary's River, lakes and Chesapeake Ranch Estates, the creeks off the packs. And that is Eric's home territory. So he knows dang darn well where those fish are because he is the guy who fishes every day. Not almost every day, every day.
Can we give Eric Packard a little bit of attention? Give it up for Air Packers.
Look,
All right, hey.
5 years from now, Dylan's going to be like, "Where was my applause?"
Can we give it
I'm
up?
gonna remember this. I'm gonna remember that.
Give it up for Dylan Waters, Team Waters. Everybody.
There we go. I appreciate it, Zach.
I do too. Hey, we're kind of a little past our time here. We have one more question, I think, and I thought I'd jump in and field it first, and then I'd love to hear from everyone. And I want to thank you guys for joining us, and I also want to welcome you as well. And I've had the pleasure of fishing with all of you, and I hope to fish with you a lot more. So, Matthew asked, what is everyone's favorite fish to eat from the bay? I grew up on the South River, and white perch was just a staple, a dinner table staple for me and my family. And that's mine. So, I don't know. Let's go, Lenny.
Yeah, I get asked that question all the time. Not necessarily just about the bay, but about what's my favorite fish to eat. And my answer is always the same. Yes.
There's so many good options.
Take it away, Dylan.
I'm gonna have to second Zach there. White perch has got to be my favorite fish to eat. They're so abundant. You know, I grew up fishing for them on, you know, all around Deal, the West River. I still fish for them. I always make sure in the summertime I've got fresh perch fillets in my fridge. I go through them pretty regularly. A close second is got to be smoked bluefish or speckled trout. But I think perch is going to be at the top of my list.
Nice. Now, before David answers this question, I'm just going to say I know what the answer is, but go ahead, Dave.
I'm going to preface this with saying that this is how you guys know I really love fishing. I don't eat fish. If I had to, it would be white perch or yellow perch. But I don't eat fish. This is all just for fun for me.
You and Eric Packard.
Yeah.
I actually didn't really eat fish for a while, although I am coming around to it now. And snakehead are definitely my favorite. I just make them just like chicken.
It's hard to argue with a snakehead on the plate.
Yeah.
Rockin'. Well, gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us. Everybody, be on the lookout. We're going to have all kinds of cool video. These guys are going to be contributing to the magazine. We're going to have articles. You're going to see their bylines. It's really good stuff. We are going to amp up the Fish Talk coverage of all things fishing. And now we got an injection of youth. So I hope everybody enjoys it. And thank you all for joining us tonight. That was a lot of fun. Great episode of Live with Lenny. And Zach, thank you for pulling all the levers in the background.
Happy to do it. Great show. Thanks, guys.